Hi, welcome to your 8-minute introduction to Hagia Sophia. I'm setting my timer. I'm going to really stick to the 8 minutes. Okay, so Hagia Sophia was sponsored by Emperor Justinian, whom you should already know something about, and his importance in the Byzantine Empire. You'll notice from our identification information that we do have architects' names. They weren't actually architects; they were both engineers, but we give them credit for designing and figuring out how to put this piece together. Anthemius of Tralles and Isidorus of Miletus, right? So if you just remember Anthemius and Isidorus, you're good to go. So it is in Constantinople, or what was once known as Constantinople. It is now known as Istanbul. This is in Turkey, or what's now known as Turkey. You will notice the exterior here. We see a big dome in the middle, right? Which should remind you of the centrally planned building that I talked about before. And then I see a half dome here, another half dome, and the same thing falls on the other side. So what we'll have in this particular Byzantine church is not just a centrally planned building, but a combination of a central plan and a basilica plan, because the core of it, the center of it, is shaped and designed like a centrally planned building. However, it goes further, or it has more longitudinal orientation than a pure, strictly centrally planned building. I'll show you an image of what I mean in just a few moments. Like all Byzantine churches, filled with mosaics. This church has a very interesting history. When the Ottomans came in, obviously the religion changed from Christianity to Islam. They converted the church from a Christian church into a mosque. You can see some elements of the mosque. Here we have some large roundels with some writing in Persian on them. Okay. We'll see also, you can't see it so much in this image, but we'll see the Qibla wall. So, and I know you don't know what a Qibla wall is, but we'll go over that when we talk about mosque vocabulary. We'll see these minarets, these towers. These towers were not there originally. Okay, these minarets are additions to the building by the Ottomans. A minaret is a feature of a mosque. Minaret just means tower. Okay, that's all it means. And why are the towers important? It's because that's where the call to prayer, that's the place from which the call to prayer is made. So 5 times a day, the prayer that devout Muslims are required to offer, a reminder of those prayers would come from those minarets 5 times a day. Hagia Sophia was later turned into not a mosque, was changed from a mosque into a museum, as Turkey made attempts to secularize later on. Very recently, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, it was turned back into a mosque. This decision was extremely controversial. When they made the decision to turn it back into a mosque, I believe they made a commitment not to cover up the mosaics that were already there. I think that was one of the things that they had to promise not to do. Why would the mosaics be covered up? It's because first of all, the mosaics are images from Christianity, right? And secondly, in Islam, there is a practice called aniconism. So it's kind of like iconoclasm, but aniconism means that you cannot depict the human figure in a religious setting. We will see plenty of human figures depicted in non-religious contexts in the Islamic works that we'll study, but the prohibition against human imagery is really only applicable to religious contexts. Now, different time periods and different sects have taken that to different extremes, right? So sometimes there is absolutely total, in some areas of the world, totally forbidding human imagery. But at its core, Islam does not forbid human imagery, only human imagery in a religious context. Why? Fear of idol worship. That makes sense. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, so we'll see the interior is full of gold mosaics. What's particularly notable about Hagia Sophia is the dome. This dome is massive. The dome is massive, and you can see that the dome is different from the dome on the Pantheon, which we talked about, how the miraculousness of the dome on the Pantheon. This dome, instead of one big oculus in the middle, is punctuated all the way around with smaller windows, right? What does this do? It brings obviously more light in. You understand the connection between light and Christianity. Brings more light in, but it also makes it appear as though the dome has some kind of floating aspect to it. So almost as if it's kind of miraculously floating there. Okay. So the dome in this building is a big, big, big deal. And so when you listen to further videos about this particular building, you need to pay close attention to the dome. All right. So I see, like in centrally planned buildings, I see the ambulatory here. Above that, I see the gallery, right? This is going to be the apse, all right? And this is the naos. Let's take a closer look. So here are some mosaics, right? When it was originally turned into a mosque, the mosaics were whitewashed over. So they were covered in white paint, essentially. But that was taken down when it was converted into a museum. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I don't know that is going to remain the case now that they've converted it back into a mosque. That is in jeopardy. But if we look at these mosaics, we see again the richness, the jewels depicted. We see similar modeling that we've talked about before on the depiction of garments. And you know all about mosaic vocabulary as well. There's an incredible amount of light that comes into this church. So we'll want to note that as well. All right. So a centrally planned church, we know, kind of radiates out from the middle. And everything is basically symmetrical from that. Now, there are sometimes small exceptions. You can see that here. There's an exception, obviously, with the San Vitale and the narthex is really off center. And so, but it's basically symmetrical all the way around, right? Now, a basilica plan is longitudinal, right? It's long. It's got that long nave and that long walk down the center to get to the apse. So you're oriented towards the front of the church, right? Now, of course, we have an apse here, right? We have apses in centrally planned churches as well, but there's more horizontal space, I guess you could say, or, space that perpendicular space as opposed to parallel, perpendicular space is also significant. So the deal about Hagia Sophia is that it's a combination of both a centrally planned church as well as a basilica planned church. Okay. So some vocabulary for you. I realize I'm a little over the 8 minutes, but I'm going to do this anyway because I think it's important. We have the naos. The naos is the central space in a centrally planned church. It's like the nave and the basilica plan. That's the naos. We have 4 huge piers right here that help to support the gigantic dome that's over this space. We also have half domes here and here that also help to support the weight of the dome. We have smaller domes from that as well. Those half domes, yes. The sanctuary is here, from here to here. This is where basically the priest is going to prepare for the mass. People aren't really allowed back there. The iconostasis, I've already mentioned before, goes here. So basically the iconostasis prevented, it's not there anymore, prevented just anybody from seeing what was happening on the altar. So you might wonder, well, how they know what's going on? Anything's happening at all? Because there's incense, there's sound, et cetera, et cetera. So the iconostasis went here, right, to protect the altar and what's happening on the altar, which is considered profoundly holy, to protect that from the view of just anybody. Okay. We have two narthexes here. We have an inner narthex and we have an outer narthex. So you see, we have two spaces that the religious worshiper goes through before he or she enters the holy space, right? So you want to think about, okay, so this is about preparation, right? Preparation for entering holy spaces, inner narthex and outer narthex. All right, that's as far as I'm going to go for Hagia Sophia. Thank you for listening. Sorry I went over a little bit over time, but I hope that was useful.